everyone. I'm Mark Foster, and this is the HOA Leadership Network. We're going to be talking about HOA Communications in this webinar. This is a topic that has come up a lot as a request from members in our network, and we have been featuring this topic in all of our chapter meetings throughout the month of September 2025. This webinar is really designed for those of you who couldn't make the meeting, or for those of you perhaps who would just like a refresher. In this webinar, we're going to be talking about email communications, the relevance of communications, how you can make them more efficient and more effective. Before we get started, we do have a short video that will show you that gives you a good overview of what we'll be discussing today. If you've already seen this video, you can skip past it. But if you've not seen it, I recommend that you watch it, and we'll unpack all of the issues that the video covers right after it ends. Thank you again for joining, and we'll get started in a moment. Here's the video. Homeowner associations and their boards play a critical role in managing community living, but they often face a variety of challenges, many of which stem from communication issues. While precise statistics vary, research and expert opinions suggest that a significant percentage of HOA problems, estimated to be anywhere between 30 and 60%, arise due to poor communication from boards of directors. Clear and frequent communications between boards and residents to ensure that the community is well informed about changes in rules, major capital improvement projects, or other issues that affect HOA living is becoming more and more important in today's busy and often crowded lifestyles. A lack of frequent communication by boards can lead to lack of transparency. Boards that often fail to communicate their decisions, policies, and financial matters clearly can lead to distrust and speculation among homeowners. Inadequate information dissemination. Important updates that are not communicated effectively will lead to misunderstandings about community rules, maintenance schedules, and upcoming meetings. Limited engagement. Boards that do not actively seek input from homeowners, even if homeowners are not part of any voting process, can result in a lack of community involvement and decreased satisfaction. When communication takes a backseat by HOA boards, it can lead to frustration among residents, and, more alarmingly, any gaps in communication can get filled in by those who speculate or take matters into their own hands. Some of the more common examples of poor HOA communications include rule enforcement issues. If a board fails to effectively communicate changes in community rules, residents might inadvertently violate them, resulting in fines and ultimately resentment. Financial misunderstandings. Lack of clarity regarding budget allocations can lead to homeowner dissatisfaction, particularly if they feel their own funds are not being used appropriately. Improvement projects. If a board does not communicate the details of upcoming projects like renovations, upgrades, re-roofing, maintenance, or landscaping, it can lead to frustration among residents who may feel their input was not considered, or they were not adequately forewarned of a project start date. Boards can increase satisfaction by regularly communicating decisions that are being made to their residents in a timely fashion, but publishing minutes of meetings is not enough to satisfy most residents' needs for information and updates. Some more proven methods employed by successful boards include regular emails to residents that immediately follow important decisions or projects, encouragement for residents to attend any and all regular board meetings and annual meetings that are held. Regular resident open forums during board meetings, which give residents a chance to communicate their issues and be heard on certain topics. A consistent community newsletter, which can often foster a spirit of community and togetherness among residents. A community website or private social media page for access by residents to gain important information about HOA events, finances, decisions, and projects. Surveys, which can help boards understand the attitudes and opinions of residents on a variety of topics, and can lead to better engagement by residents while improving decision-making by boards. It is proven that open and transparent communications by boards can go a long way in creating a sense of unity, community, and satisfaction among HOA residents. I like to start these presentations by going over a few relevant stats about homeowner associations in the U.S. and also here in Minnesota. It turns out there's some 75 million plus Americans who currently live in HOAs, and of course that number is growing. Recent data shows that some 82 to 84% of new construction in the United States is in HOAs. It equates to about 370,000 HOAs in the U.S. Here in Minnesota, we have roughly 7,500 HOAs just within our state borders, and that equates to about 1.5 million residents. The value of all of our HOA homes in the U.S., almost $13 trillion. Some 86% of HOA residents rate their experience in the HOA as positive. Some of us might wonder about that stat, that sometimes as board leaders we only hear the negative, but by and large these survey results do hold up for multiple surveys that most people have a positive experience in their HOA. 94% report that they get along with their neighbors. 82% say that boards serve in their best interest. This is where the math is interesting. 18% then would not get along with their board. And as leaders, those are the ones that we often hear from. 82% are on good terms with boards, probably that same group of people. And then this is an interesting stat. The question was, do you go to board meetings, regular board meetings, the monthly meetings, the quarterly meetings, the annual meetings? Obviously, we all know the answer. Many people don't attend those meetings, but 63% report that they would go more frequently if the board meetings were virtual. And in our network, a lot of our members do have virtual board meetings, either by Google Meets, by Zoom, by Microsoft Teams. 83% say that they're positive on their property management company or their property manager. Now, some 49%, so under 50, say assessments, the monthly fees that we charge, are about right. That leaves 51% who don't think so. 36% that assessments are too high. We're going to go over some HOA communication best practices now. And number one on the runway is transparency. It's important for HOA boards to be open about many things, including and especially financial matters, making sure residents have access to the finances, the year-to-date, the spending, the budget, upcoming projects, any type of re-roofing, any kind of painting, anything that has to do with resurfacing of streets, anything that really is in charge, that the board is in charge of, that could affect residents either by way of disruption or property values, is important to be included, and decisions that affect either residents in whole or in part. Clarity and conciseness. This is where many communicators fall apart. Let's make sure that our messages are clear, they're concise, and we get to the point and avoid any kind of jargon or anything that might be easily misunderstood. Use multiple communications channels. Not everybody uses email. Certainly not everybody's on social media. Not everybody, uses a website. Not everybody's even on the internet. But there is good old-fashioned U.S. mail. There's what I would call sneakerware, where, you deliver something door to door with people wearing sneakers. It can be done, but it's important to figure out what the best channels are in your HOA and to use them. Active listening is a communication best practice. We oftentimes don't take the time to ask our residents what they think about a particular issue, a particular project, a particular sticky issue that might be happening in the HOA. We often learn things as a board if we do actively seek out feedback. We actively listen to residents who have either complaints or feedback, and that is an important best practice that we should follow. Prompt response. We all get angry when we send an email and we never hear back. We've probably all experienced it, communicating with companies, communicating with individuals. Imagine you're a resident and you're emailing the board and the board doesn't respond. It's important that we have timely response to questions and concerns so that we build trust and prevent any future frustration among residents. Having a clear policy is important. So as a board, you can decide how or who is going to respond or to be the main person who sends out the communications. So maybe it's always the president. Perhaps it's the secretary. Maybe the entire board gets a chance to send communications based on their area of expertise. It's important to sit down as a board and decide what those policies are, how they would also work with the property manager. Property managers, if you have one, would be communicating with your residents, and it's important to understand what they communicate about and what the board should be communicating about. You don't want lots of overlap. You don't want lots of redundancies. Technology integration, that is important as well. You can leverage a lot of digital platforms which enhance communication, making it all much more engaging, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Resident involvement, encouraging residents to participate in community discussions, also at board meetings, decision-making processes, those are all really healthy. Having listening sessions. Perhaps you have a monthly board meeting that you allow residents, maybe the first 10, 15 minutes, they get a chance to voice their opinions, ask questions, understand what's going on by getting involved. So it's an important thing to have venues, opportunities for residents to be involved and to be able to speak their mind. And then, of course, there's conflict resolution. As leaders, there's always conflict. We're not always going to make everyone happy. We are elected to be representatives of our HOA. Not every decision may be popular, but it's important to have procedures in place for addressing and resolving conflicts constructively. This often comes down to communications. This often comes down to providing FAQs, frequently asked questions, common questions that you often get on projects, or perhaps there are issues you can sort of head off. But, it's important to have a good conflict resolution approach so that you continue to build that trust and allow residents to feel like their concerns have been heard and their issues are satisfied. Now, email. We're going to get into some best practices. Not every HOA board uses email. We've kind of discovered that as we've gone through our chapters in September. However, email is probably the predominant communications channel used by HOA boards and certainly by property managers across the state. A couple of the reasons you'd want to use email is because most people do have it. We've said earlier, some people don't, but we're going to go with sort of the greater good here, which is email. Most people do have it. Most people use it. Most people open it. Using it for meeting announcements, your annual meeting, your board meeting, special meetings, listening sessions, it's important to use email for that reason. Contractor operations, if the landscaper is doing fall cleanup and scheduled for X date, or the snowplow guys are running late because it was a big storm, or we're doing a re-roofing project and that's going to start on XYZ. Email's all good for that kind of sort of contractor operations announcements. Distribution of minutes. If you've had a meeting, you want to send your minutes out, email is an appropriate way to do that. If you don't have a portal, or if there's not a property manager that has a place where those minutes are housed, or you don't have a website, sending out those minutes is always a good, desirable thing. And you can do that by email. And then any updates on changing situations. Perhaps your HOA has a pool and the pool is closed for the season, or you have a guest house where people can use it for fitness or for the sauna, insert need here. But those are great places to use email if there are changing situations, things that are closed, things are under repair, things are reopening. You get the idea. Great use of email. Now I'm going to show you an example of an email that I received that is an example of something not to do. And it looks like this. So this is an email that I received from an HOA, and the email is just too long. It goes on. It is something that looks to me like it should have a plot. It is so long, and it does not really get to the point. So it's really a bad example of an email, because frankly, as soon as you open it, the first thing you're going to do is probably delete it. You're likely not going to read it. There is a better way, and this example would be this one, which I wrote, that just simply shows how to invite, for example, someone to a meeting, show the location, show the time. The agenda, for example, is going to be attached, or it might be here on a link. There might be other information like the previous email that had all information about decorum and rules of order. If that's important, that could also be in a document, that PDF document, and I would recommend PDFs whenever you do attachments, never a Word document. Word documents can be changed. Send PDFs. And those things can be attached. Those could be a hyperlink. It's a really good way to show and use email in a good, effective way. So this is a good example. Now, some HOAs we've found do not have an email list. Some of our HOAs that have property managers, they allow the property manager to just communicate largely by surface mail, or perhaps the board has just no access to an email list or has never built one. And there are ways to do it. You can start small. You can have people sign up at the annual meeting. Annual meeting typically have larger groups, larger attendance, and that's a good place to get them to sign up simply by, getting a form, maybe in the back of the room, and announcing that we're starting an email list. We want you to be on the list. We're not going to sell your name, but we do want to communicate with you regularly. And we would like you to sign up and provide us with your current email address. You can go door to door. That has some, trepidation among board leaders to do that. But again, with the right kind of speech and the right kind of sort of introduction of why you're doing this, it's a good way to meet your neighbors that you haven't seen for a while or not met at all, but also to ask them for their email address as you're trying to find a better way to communicate with people. You can create a Google form as well and advertise the link so people can easily go to the link and sign up. And you can create a QR code, put that QR code up in common areas where they can scan that QR code and go to that form. You can also create a website. You could create a website that has a place for them to sign up. Now, a lot of people ask about email cadence, meaning frequency. How often should we communicate? Is once enough? I will tell you that once is never enough. You need to communicate often, and you need to communicate in a relevant way. And I'll show you an example here. Let's say that we are going to be having a special meeting. Let's just say it's a listening session. It's going to be in December. So it's on December the 9th. There are 3 different areas of urgency here that I'd like to share with you, and I'll show you the types of information that go in these 3 different areas of awareness, information, and then ultimately urgency as we get closer to the event. So the first one might be a save the date. You're sending out to all residents that we're having a listening session. It's December 9th. It's going to be held at the guest house, or it's going to be held at the country club, wherever you hold your meetings that would hold enough people, and we'd like you to save the date, and it's at this location. More information coming soon. So that's the awareness phase. You get into the information phase by sending information out now, maybe with the agenda. So, again, a reminder, we've got this December 9th listening session. Here's the agenda we'd like for you to attend. Perhaps there's other information you want to send out as well. Maybe you're trying to get information on a project. This would be the place where you would do it. Now, you're going to send out a reminder a few weeks later. Just a reminder, this is coming up. We want you to put it on your calendar if you haven't done so already. And as a courtesy and convenience, the agenda or information that is needed is attached. So that's basically email number 3. Now we get into urgency. We're a week or 2 before the event, and we're sending a final reminder. The event's coming up. We're looking forward to seeing you. If you have any questions, call, XYZ. But it is a final reminder so that in a busy world, people will remember that this event is coming up. Now, the one email that often gets forgotten is this one, which is the follow-up. The follow-up is an important one.
you've had a good crowd, you want to thank people for attending, you want to maybe follow up with minutes or other information. If maybe there were some questions that could not be answered at the meeting, you now have answers, you're going to follow up, etc. The follow-up email is very important. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 emails that you would send for one event. And that's often a really good cadence for something that is important where you're trying to get a good audience. So we highly recommend that you do more than one when it comes to email communications, because in this busy world, and thinking of your own email box, it is cluttered, I'm certain. If it's anything like mine, it's full. So it's really important to communicate often, have good subject lines so that they know it's coming from you, it's coming from the HOA, and it gives the eyeball a chance to rest on it in the clutter of the email box and have a good chance of clicking on it. So subject lines are good, clarity and conciseness are good, and frequency are good. So some best practices, again, that conciseness, being to the point, telling the most important issue first. This is where it's important that the board agrees on what you're trying to do. What's your objective here for this piece of communication? So stick to that objective, and be concise. Send reminders, just as I've showed you in the last slide. It takes more than one email to get residents' attention. Send reminders, send follow-ups, send information as needed. Include a link. So if you do have to provide additional info, we recommend a link. Attachments are fine, but sometimes they do get blocked by firewalls depending on the email that you get from people, and if they've given you their work email, or perhaps they just have a filter on their email. But by and large, attachments are fine if they're not too large. Links are good if you can store it on a Dropbox, or perhaps it's from your property manager's portal or your own website portal. That's a great place to allow a resident to click on a link and then download the information. And then, of course, providing a contact. If somebody has questions, who should they call? Especially if it's project related, somebody has a question about something, they're going to have a big family event, and now you're telling me that, one of the streets is going to be blocked off, or there's going to be disruptions. I may have some questions about that as a resident. I want to know who I can call or who I can contact to get a little bit more information and clarity. This often gets missed. Having a communications contact at the end is very important. All right, let's get into newsletters. This is something more and more HOAs are doing, because guess what? Residents don't always read minutes, and oftentimes the most important issues and decisions get missed. You can bring all of those good nuggets out of the minutes and create a newsletter. So why use a newsletter? Great for monthly or quarterly summaries. Now, I will pause here and tell you that it is very difficult sometimes to start a newsletter and keep it going. It often is one of those things where once you're done with your monthly newsletter, you're done creating it, you should be starting the next one. It's a conveyor belt. And if it's quarterly, it doesn't really ease the pain. It still has to be done. Somebody has to do it and think through it. The worst thing you can do is start a newsletter and then stop. It just creates frustration. It creates some confusion. It certainly doesn't help build any kind of trust or credibility. So if you're going to do the newsletter, make sure someone's dedicated to doing it and they're doing it on a regular schedule. It's a great place to overview any important decisions. Again, those decisions might be in the minutes, but frankly, at the end of the day, who reads minutes? Some people do, not a lot of people do. So I would say for the greater good, putting important decisions into a newsletter helps to memorialize your accomplishments, the things that have been done, decided, projects that have been completed. Those are one of the great uses of newsletters, is to bring those to the top. Featuring photos from residents is a really good way to get people involved. Ask residents to send photos of wildlife that they see. Perhaps they've got family and grandchildren coming over and they're playing in the front yard or the common area of the HOA, and there's a great picture. I mean, you can decide what photos you want to use, but frankly, photos do get people engaged, especially if you credit them for the photo and thank them. And it also builds trust. It builds community. So newsletters are a terrific way to get the word out. Now, this is an example of a newsletter that I do for the HOA that I live in. Now, I love to take photos, I love to write, so it's kind of easy for me. I know that's not, something everybody loves to do. But you don't have to make it this beautiful or this comprehensive or this complicated. You can actually just use a word processing software document and create your own newsletter. It can be very simple. Come up with a clever headline, something much more clever than what I've done here, but something up at the top. Again, this can be done in Word or some word processing that you have. Write your discussion points, whatever you're trying to convey, what the board discussed last night, new landscaping, new wall installation, etc. Whatever it happens to be, you can highlight those things in good big font, easy to read. And certainly it doesn't have to go into great length, but you can at least provide information to residents that they understand what the decisions or the most important information is. You have a photo, you put it in, maybe the residents gathered for an event of some kind, a holiday party, and it'd be a great addition to the newsletter along with a caption. This one being from National Night Out back in August, where I live. So again, easy to do, easy to make. Newsletters don't have to be 10 pages long. They can be 2 pages long. They could be 4 pages long. They might even be 1 page, but at least it's information that's critical and people will likely read it over minutes. There are some great newsletter platforms you can use. You can look into MailChimp. You can look into Constant Contact. They typically range between $13 and $20 per month, depending on your needs. So it's not terribly expensive. They're very easy to use. There are a lot of drag and drop technology. You can make beautiful newsletters and send them out digitally. So as long as you have an email list, it's really easy to use. You can print them from there if you need to as well, and do that sneakerware I talked about where you're delivering them door to door if somebody wants to do that, or perhaps you just have a pile of them in the common area for people to pick up. But digital is best, but there are ways to make these things in a professional way, in a way that's kind of fun, and these platforms are very helpful if you wanted to go that route. All right, some best practices with newsletters. Appeal. I've talked about that, choosing a format that it's easy to read, easy to maintain. That is something that you do want to ensure that you do on a regular basis. Include photos, pictures from residents, build connectivity. They look for those photos. If they've sent a photo in, they definitely want to ensure that their photo either was in there or they want to show it off, that they took this great shot of a sunset. They'll go to that newsletter and they'll show it around. So it sort of builds a little bit of camaraderie and maybe a little bit more distribution, a little wider distribution. But it does certainly appeal to a lot of residents who love to share photos. Featuring board decisions, including the highlights of recent board decisions without repeating the minutes. You don't want to just take the minutes and plop them into a newsletter format. I would have somebody rewrite it. AI can help with that if you want to use AI. Maybe there's somebody, a resident, who is a great writer or who loves to write, who can take the minutes. They don't even have to be at the meeting. They may maybe just are able to rewrite the minutes in more of a compelling way, more of a narrative way, something that's more in keeping with newsletters. And of course, the board should be reviewing those newsletters before they go out. Being consistent, as I said, publishing on a regular schedule, not wavering from that schedule, super important. I'm going to talk briefly now about surveys. It's a great way to get residents engaged. In my own HOA here in Lakeville, I've used SurveyMonkey, to use as a survey platform. I've also used Google Forms as a place to build a survey. That's free. SurveyMonkey is also free. They have a free version, I believe, so you'll want to just check that out. But there are ways to do electronic surveys and gather information and opinions from residents so that the board is better informed on maybe sticky topics or large capital improvements that you're considering. So surveys can help you seek their opinions in a way that is anonymous. It's a way that they feel comfortable. Lots of people do surveys. Lots of people take surveys. And it's a great way for you as a board to get information that you may not otherwise be able to capture. It helps you understand the attitudes of residents before making critical decisions. gain additional feedback and ideas. One of the things I do is I'll typically at the end of a survey just say, are there other things you'd like to share, or would you think that there's a better way to do this? Please share, and give them a free form box. And it's really terrific. Oftentimes residents will have a great idea you hadn't thought of. So it doesn't always happen, but sometimes happens. And you want to tap into that talent and that experience of residents who are out there that may be able to opine on a particular project, capital improvement, or some other issue that you're struggling with. It also creates engagement. We often, as I mentioned, don't ask people their opinion, and we should. We're leaders. We should ask people what they think. And surveys are a great way to do that. And again, common theme, builds community, builds trust. That's important. Now, this is something that I did in Lakeville where I asked people to provide us feedback on a variety of things that we were faced with in our own HOA. Maybe you're faced with some of these. We've got a huge hedge of lilacs that need to be replaced. We've had some bushes that have died in front of townhomes. We've had cul-de-sacs that need resurfacing, expensive, right? Cracked areas of walking paths, plastic edging, wall vegetation on a retaining wall, walking paths where we have gravel, should we be paving those? And what I did is I asked them whether they thought it should be a low, moderate, or high priority. And that allowed us to get really a good understanding of what people thought about these various projects that the board was considering at this time. We also had an issue with plastic edging. We all probably have this plastic edging that gets chipped up and nicked up, and it gets a little bit, dated after a while, needs to be replaced. So we were looking at 3 different options. We were looking at plastic edging, like what we have today, just replacing it. That's the lowest cost option. The bullet edging, which landscape companies, mowers don't really like because, the frost heaves them. And so it's a little more expensive, not ideal. Looks great for a while until it starts heating. And then there's poured concrete edging, which can be done from several companies out there that is essentially like pouring a curb, but it looks like stone, like in the picture that you see on the right-hand side. Now, we asked our residents what they thought in giving them enough information, and then we gave them the option of do not replace. You see that at the bottom. So what ended up happening here is, we ended up on the plastic edging getting this particular chart, which was produced in Google Forms. I did not make this chart. This chart was produced automatically in Google Forms. And again, it's a free service. It's terrific. So in this case, it showed that 42% said, hey, just do the plastic edging. And we had about 41% like the individual bullet edging, and then only 11% picked the really expensive option. So this was helpful for us. You kind of have a little bit of a, I guess, call it a 50-50 split, if you will, in terms of the 2 top options. But we ultimately ended up going with the plastic edging. It was the least expensive option. And with everything going up these days, including insurance, it is super important to make the right choices. And this really helped inform our board about what residents thought. Now, in that stack ranking of what they thought should be most important, this was a chart, again, produced by Google Forms that shows the low, moderate, and high choices. So this gave us a really good understanding. If you look at the blue bars, the retaining wall and the gravel walking paths, not particularly a priority among residents. Replacing dying bushes, well, guess what? That is a much higher priority. You see some moderate priorities, the walking path cracks being repaired, plastic edging being repaired. You can kind of see where that netted out. So again, this was very helpful for the board in understanding where people stood in relation to many of these capital improvement projects and repair projects that we were trying to undertake. So you should consider this. Again, Google Forms. There are other platforms, but this is a particularly easy one to use. So some HOA survey best practices: be concise, don't overwhelm. It's really important to just ask the questions that stay on point. Understand exactly what you're trying to do as a board and keep on that track. Don't wander off and make a 10 or 20 point survey questionnaire. It's really important, I think, to keep it short so that people can take the survey quickly. They have busy lives. So many people work, obviously, and you want their response, but you don't want to overwhelm them. So choose your questions wisely. Think about your end goal. Ensure the board's questions are represented. Make sure as a board that you agree on what you're trying to ask and what you're attempting to do. And that brings me to my next point, which is provide a date. Oftentimes surveys don't have a date. If you don't have a date, you don't have some urgency. So, essentially you want to make sure people know that you're looking for that information by the 1st of the month, by the 15th of the month. And then just like that email cadence that I talked about, you want to remind people to complete the survey. Don't just send it out and hope for the best. Send a reminder. We're still looking for your results. If you've already completed the survey, we thank you. If you've not, please take a few moments to do it. You want to send that out multiple times. When you get to that end date, you can decide maybe to extend the survey date. We haven't heard from everybody. We're going to give 10 more days. We're going to give a week. We're going to give 5 more days. Whatever it happens to be, it's important that you do have some sense of urgency for residents to complete it. And then, of course, keeping things confidential. People aren't going to fill out a survey and give their opinion, especially if you provide them with an open box, an open field to provide their narrative comments. Many people want to ensure that it will be confidential, that their name won't be shared, and try to use language that will make them feel comfortable that their individual information is not going to be disseminated in any way. And that does bring me to one final point that's not on this slide, which is a lot of people feel like they can't do a survey because they haven't been trained in surveys, or they're not some sort of a analytical person or a tactician or some individual who does surveys for a living. That is advice that I would throw out. We can all ask questions as a board. It's pretty easy to do yes/no questions, multiple choice. I think as a board, you can all sit down and figure out best ways to word things to ensure that people will answer it. But please don't shy away from surveys just because you haven't been trained at it. In fact, maybe you start simple, and the more you do it, the easier it gets and the better you will get. Great way to get information. Those reminders are very important, sending them often. As I've mentioned, make sure that data's in there and ensure that people do, pay attention. A lot of people will put things off. It's sort of a bell curve. You'll get a lot of people taking the survey right away. Then it kind of, in the middle of, your 2-week collection period, it just sort of drops off to nothing. And then at the very end, here we go. We get a lot of people coming in. So do make sure you're sending reminders so you get the best responses possible. All right, well, that is our webinar on HOA Communications. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've not joined our network, please do so. We have 4 chapter meetings that are live every single month, and we'd love for you to join us. It's free to join. You can scan this QR code that's on your screen or go to www.hoalnet.com and join on our website. Again, it is free to be a member of our network. We do want to thank our sponsors who fund our program and keep our relationships and memberships free with our members: Gonzo Brothers Landscape, First Service Residential, Legacy Trees, SJJ Law, Crest Exteriors, Insurance Warehouse, and MNRC Home of the Armor program. Thank you again, and we hope to see you soon at a chapter meeting. I'm Mark Foster.